The young girl adjusted her pink wig. It fit perfectly, not a single hair showing. The false eyelashes were securely glued. She smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Overall, the image turned out great. This is enough to become a full-fledged unexpected guest. The girl's name is Maria Avina, and she plans to disrupt someone's wedding ceremony today. Maria works for the organization Fruit, whose employees gain people's trust by carrying out orders from their clients. The heroine is the agency's trump card, green-eyed brunette. She can transform into a wedding guest, or she can portray a lover or a disgruntled visitor. The job is not easy, but thanks to her perfect makeover and excellent acting, she has never screwed up. Hiding as an unexpected guest and ruining weddings is her specialty. The head of the Fruit organization, Labrado, offered the girl a new task. Eating a chocolate bar, Maria asked what kind of task it was. The blonde boss asked if she knew Duke Barry Winter. Avina replied that of course she knew. He was the head of a high-ranking noble family. He had everything: status, money, and looks, but he was notorious for his lack of interest in women. Maria had not crossed paths with him. He had suddenly announced his wedding the other day. The whole of society was alarmed. There was a terrible fuss. Labrado noticed that she was well informed. So her mission is to destroy this wedding, and the Duke's reputation at the same time. The man asked her opinion. This is the girl's specialty. The lady who sat down on the armrest of the sofa hesitated a little. Maria said that they were not the most decent organization, but they did not take assignments that could have dire consequences. To which Labrado replied that they would pay a lot of money. The girl looked at the boss with distrust. She suspected that he had some hidden intentions, but she still noticed that the boss missed an important point: how much money there would be. The man's eyes sparkled and he replied that 1,000,000 gold. Maria smiled and replied that she agreed. They sealed the deal with a handshake. Whatever the job, she would complete it successfully. A lady in a pink wig and a beautiful light dress stepped out of the carriage as soon as the coachman announced that they had arrived. The girl asked her to wait. She promised not to be gone long and to pay 4 times as much. The driver happily agreed. Maria noted mentally that the means of escape had been arranged. Now she needed to get into the wedding hall. She looked around the palace and assumed that the ceremony had already begun. Entering inside, the girl admired the huge spaces. And some people said that it would be a modest wedding. The dining room was huge, and it was unclear how many banquet halls there were. As she walked through the corridors of the palace, Avina was surprised that there was no security. No one checked the invitations. Everything was so easy that it was irritating. The lady forced herself not to think too much. If she gets the reward anyway, she will finally be able to open her own cafe. She has long dreamed of the life of a barista. Maria quickened her pace. She thought that it made no difference whether he was a duke or whoever. Everything would end as soon as she completed the task and ran away. The girl opened the doors to the hall with thoughts of her dream. She didn't care what happened. This wedding was over. She joined the game. An angry girl burst into the wedding hall with a bang of doors opening, shouting that she was against this marriage. The bride and groom and their guests stared at her. A buzz of voices went through the room, trying to find out who this lady was and what all the fuss was about. The bride asked the groom if he knew her. Maria continued to move around the room, her anger replaced by unhappiness. She said, almost crying, that the Duke's child was in her belly, mentally forcing herself to think about sad things, about how she was the most miserable woman in the world right now. She needed to force the tears out of herself. She swallowed convulsively and lamented how the Duke could leave her and marry another. The guests reacted differently to the show. Approaching the groom, Avina asked if he had really forgotten their hot night. Playing out this scene, Maria assumed that this was enough, and that she had to leave there quickly. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief and asked how she could live alone with a child now. The Duke came very close to the actress. The girl swallowed nervously. The aristocrat turned out to be a handsome man. She saw him so close for the first time and described him as a cold-blooded, handsome man. The guests were clearly in anticipation of the performance's denouement. Winter looked into Maria's eyes with smeared mascara, and then pulled her to him by the waist. He called her sweetheart and asked what was taking her so long. Twisting her pink lock of hair around his finger, Barry added that he had waited so long for his darling. Avina was simply shocked. She did not understand what was happening. Everything was clearly not going according to plan. The Duke looked at her with a smirk on his face. And in her head a bunch of questions swarmed. Why she became dear? What did it mean he was waiting for her because this was their first meeting? The Duke of Winter continued to hug the actress. He said that his little girl seemed surprised herself and asked her not to think of running away. The hum of the guests grew louder. Maria was still in a stupor. She placed her hands on the man's chest, trying to collect her thoughts and understand how everything could have turned out like this. Unexpectedly, Barry picked up the unexpected guest in his arms and said that now they would go. Avina only had time to think that she was going to prison, as the Duke was already carrying her out of the hall. The bride, having recovered from the shock, shouted after her would-be husband, asking what happened to their wedding. The groom stopped and, looking sideways at her, asked her to be quieter, since his child might get scared. And then he smiled and added that, moreover, his little girl was worried. Maria huddled in Winter's arms. The guests' whispers could be heard around them. Having taken on the task for $1,000,000 gold, she understood that it would be dangerous. But no one warned her that the Duke was crazy. As they left the palace, the man pulled Avina to her feet. Crossing his arms over his chest, he turned to the little one and said that it seemed they had a lot to talk about. First of all, about that hot night. Maria cursed silently. She was trying hard to figure out what to do. There was the option of teleportation, but she could easily be caught. After all, standing before her is the head of a respectable family and the only powerful lord in the entire empire. That is, a professional who skillfully wields magic. The Duke continued to stare at her, waiting for an answer. The girl was considering the option that if she was caught using magic, she would have to come up with an excuse. She just had to find the right moment. Barry lifted Maria's face and asked why his darling wasn't looking at him. She was staring at him with wide eyes and didn't understand what this madman was talking about. And he was very handsome. The lady couldn't concentrate. His lordship was looking at her intently. Avina could read in that look that she shouldn't even try to deceive him. She clenched her jaw. She has no choice, so the girl decided to check who would win in the end. She touched his hand and apologized, and then added that she would like to talk to him in a more private place. Maria looked at him tenderly, lightly touching the Duke's hand. Catching his gaze, she realized that now she had to run. Having connected the power of movement, the actress evaporated. Avina rudely teleported into the organization's office, startling Labrado with her sudden appearance. She was lying on the floor. Everything was spinning before her eyes. The boss ran to the girl, trying to bring her to her senses. The Duke looked at his empty hands. He had not thought that the guest would run away like that. The man smiled mysteriously, and the long earring in his right ear swayed rhythmically in the wind. He thought that a very interesting bird had flown to him. His would-be bride called Barry. She was shaking with anger. She asked if he understood what he had done and where that woman had gone. The man turned to her and calmly replied that the woman had left, probably because she had things to do. Then, darkening, he said that the bride must be mistaken about something. She had no right to pressure him. The girl froze at first and then began to shake. Stuttering a little, she tried to ask what he was saying. The Duke said that a week ago, at a party of the Marquise's family, someone slipped a sleeping pill into his glass. The bride tried to carry out her plan quickly while he was unconscious, but it didn't work out because Barry woke up, despite the fact that she did everything according to the instructions. So now the man was wondering if he had been too merciful to her that day. The girl replied that he had agreed to the wedding, but Winter noticed that this did not mean that everything would end well, and if it weren't for that girl. He leaned into her ear and added threateningly that his patience would only last until the end of the ceremony. The bride opened her eyes in horror. His lordship calmly told her to quietly disappear before everyone found out about her sin. The Duke turned and began to descend the steps. The girl cried out that she would not give in so easily. The man replied that she could do whatever she wanted. The wedding was over. She continued to say something, but he wasn't listening to her anymore. He just thought how noisy she was, and that she might also meet his baby. When the moon was already shining through the windows, Maria woke up. She was lying on the bed and her head was still buzzing. Laborado noticed that she had gotten up. The girl asked if she had returned without problems. The chief cheerfully twirled a newspaper bundle in his hands. He replied that everything had gone just fine. The task had been successfully completed. Newspapers with the news of the Duke's ruined wedding were probably already posted everywhere. Avina, stretching, wondered why everyone was fixated on Winter, since he just had a cute face. The boss rose from his chair and replied that everyone was not interested in the Duke, but but in the girl who interrupted the ceremony. Maria didn't understand. He meant her. Librato handed her a newspaper and offered to look. On the first page there was an article with their photo. The headline said in huge letters that Barry Winter had a child. The article went on to say that the Duke had a girl with the pet name My Baby and a child they were hiding, and also that her location is currently unknown. Turning the page, the girl saw another ad with her photo, which said that Winter was looking for his baby and asks to return to him, claiming that her place is next to him. Maria was shocked by what was happening. She was once again convinced that the Duke was crazy. Maria walked merrily through the city. Only 1,000,000 gold coins were spinning in her thoughts. She even sang a little from her good mood. The girl asked herself why she didn't know that spring nights are so refreshing, and she answered herself, because she didn't have any money before. A fat wallet is a guarantee of positivity. She and Librato drank some champagne to celebrate the mission successfully completed. The heavy purse of coins warmed her hand. Avina knew that with this money she would be able to pay the deposit for the small cafe. She even thought that she could look for a place for him tomorrow. The task ended, though not very successfully, but the girl reacted quickly, so it seemed that nothing terrible happened. Thanks to her excellent acting, Maria successfully completed the assignment with a huge reward. Without a doubt, she did everything perfectly. Memories of the Duke holding her close, carrying her in his arms, calling her baby came into her head. Then that wanted poster. Avina clutched the bag of money. It was horrible what he had done. Well, people aren't usually looked for. You have to live peacefully. She accepted the task not because of hatred or anything else. The girl was approaching her parents' house. Her brain was already boiling. Now she had nothing in common with the Duke. Anyway, from tomorrow her suffering will end and happiness will come. With this thought, she opened the door to the house and joyfully began to tell her father that she had come. But what she saw made her fall silent in mid-sentence. The house was turned upside down. There were broken dishes and furniture everywhere. Father was sitting in the middle of the room and crying. Avina asked what had happened. Father looked up at her with tear-stained eyes. Addressing his daughter by name, the man took her hands and said that he did not know what to do, and added that he had committed a mortal sin. The girl looked at the porcelain shards. She asked if he had taken up gambling again. Maria remembered the events of 10 years ago. Her mother was dying and she, still a girl, was crying near her bed. The woman tried to calm her daughter down and asked her not to cry. She took out a beautiful music box and handed it to her daughter, saying that from now on it would always be with her daughter instead of her. And her mother also said that she loved her. After she died, her father developed a gambling addiction. The girl watched her parent. She thought that he would pull himself together after a while and did not realize that he could lose all their property. Maria got angry and shouted, asking how much he had spent this time. A voice from behind answered that he owed as much as the price of their musty little house. The girl looked around and saw a healthy bald man with scars. She recognized him. It was the creditor. The big guy spat loudly on the floor. Avina exclaimed that it was possible to receive money in a civilized manner. "You don't need to spit for that." To which the bandit replied that he didn't care, because tomorrow the house would be gone anyway. The girl said that the cost of the broken dishes should be deducted from the debt. The man chuckled and remarked that since she valued her house so much, she should pay back the money her father had lost. If she didn't give him 1,000,000 gold pieces tomorrow, Maria would become homeless. The lady clenched her fist. She knew the money she had received would be enough to resolve the situation, but it could continue. She didn't know what would happen to her life then. Another one appeared on the threshold. He said that he had heard that this had once been an expensive dwelling, so he could not help but come. Even in ruins, it was still a manor house. The girl looked back at the voice. This guy was younger and had a pleasant appearance. He was stylishly dressed and his neck was covered with a tattoo of a laurel branch. The young man asked if Maria was the Baron's only daughter. He sat down next to the lady and remarked that she was his type. He was sorry that they had met as creditor and debtor. Avina asked him what he was talking about. She looked at him, frowning. She didn't understand why he was being nice to her if she owed him money. This guy was threatening. The creditor thoughtfully propped his chin up and smirked at his own thought. He offered Maria a date in exchange for extending the time for closing the debt. The girl jumped up in indignation. She shouted that she would not go on a date with the creditor under any circumstances. The guy took his mother's box out of his inside pocket. and asked if she would change her mind after seeing it. Avina looked with horror at her mother's gift in his hand. She said that it was impossible since it was her late mother's box. The young man was surprised. The lady involuntarily reached out her hand to it. He noticed that it was the only normal thing here, so he took it. Since it was so dear to her, he had to return it. Maria angrily clutched the purse of coins and then threw it at the guy with all her might, telling him to take it all. The creditor skillfully caught the money on the fly, happy that he still had money. The girl said that there was exactly 1,000,000 gold coins in there, so he should leave the box and get out. But the bandit replied that she should not worry. He would take care of the box until she paid the interest. The lady was surprised to hear about the percentage. She looked angrily at her father. He started mumbling something unintelligible. The guy was glad to hear the girl's name and immediately introduced himself as Vanth. As he was leaving, he told her to remember his name. The lady immediately drooped. She only quietly whispered the word, interest. The father turned to her crying. He said that he had lost all his dignity, that he was a lousy father. He started to apologize. But his daughter looked at him coldly and said that this was the last time. And if he got addicted to gambling again, she would cut off his hands. The man froze at first, and then started to shed tears again and tell her to do so. Maria added angrily that she would cut it off. The father asked what to do with the interest. The daughter promised to find a job quickly. Avina looked at the new moon through the open window. She wondered how much longer she had to cover everything and try. She remembered the words from the article where the Duke asked her to come back to him. The girl sighed sadly. She wished she was the real thing, not the Duke's fake baby. The next day, Maria suffered from a terrible headache in the office. She sat huddled on the couch, clutching her head and moaning. Cheerful Librato, sipping coffee, asked her why she was dying so early in the morning. The girl muttered that she had a hangover. The man was surprised, because she had drunk very little yesterday. Avina replied that she got drunk at home later. The boss chuckled, then smiled and told her to relax. He would have done the same. Of course, it's hard to resist when you get a lot of money in one go. Maria barely lifted her head from the table. She mumbled that that was exactly it, but now she didn't have that money. Librato shuddered and looked around, not believing what he heard. He asked her again with his eyes wide open. The cup of coffee fell out of his hands and smashed on the floor. The boss still didn't believe it, and asked again if he understood correctly that there was no money now. The girl repeated that they had, but there were none anymore. There was nothing but a hangover. The money had gone on a long voyage. The boss, having recovered a little from the shock, asked where all her money was going. The man continued to speak. As she wanted, he got tasks with a big reward, but she always has no money. The girl does not buy things, she has a cart and a good house. So she spends it all on food. Maria asked wearily, what if she doesn't? Picking up a broken cup from the floor, Librato replied that she decides for herself how to spend her money. He has no right to demand details, but seeing the sad face of his subordinate, the man said that if something was bothering her, she could tell him and he would listen. While collecting the shards of the mug, the boss cheerfully remarked that food was sacred. Then he asked if Maria was happy when she ate. Then there was a knock at the door. After being allowed to enter, Pappy's secretary popped into the office. He brought hangover medicine and green tea for the boss. The guy promised that the girl would feel better after she took it. Avina started drinking the mixture. Librato asked the secretary if he had any business. Pappy replied that he had no plans for today. Then the boss asked Maria to take a walk with the guy, since guests would be arriving soon. The girl asked languidly if she really had to go. The boss confirmed and said that she would also get some fresh air. The lady replied that she would very much like to get rid of her hangover as he ordered, but she did not have a coin. Then the boss allowed Pappy to take the government money. The couple went to a restaurant to cure their hangover. After eating the imperial bean sprout soup, Maria felt a little better. She noticed that this place was the best place to get rid of a hangover. They even gave yogurt as an extra. The girl was walking around after the restaurant wrapped in a hooded cape. She was hot and sweat was pouring down. Pappy noticed this and asked if she was hot. She replied that she was sweating on purpose to make the alcohol evaporate. After a while, Avina felt better and realized that she could live. Pappy was glad that she felt better. The lady said that she had not had breakfast that day. That was why she felt so bad. And because of the walk, her mood had improved. Having regained her fighting strength, Maria decided that it was time to go back. She turned around and told the secretary that the guests were probably about to leave. and that it was time for them to get to work. Pappy agreed. As they approached the office building, they noticed a very luxurious carriage. The girl thought that perhaps some aristocrat had arrived. As she passed the carriage towards the door, she noticed that the Duke of Barry Winter was sitting in the carriage. Avina quickly passed by and slammed the front door behind her, her heart pounding as she flew to the office. Having closed the door to the office, Maria shouted in horror to the chief that the Duke was downstairs. Librato turned his head towards her with a swagger and made sure that she had seen the guest. The girl started to panic. She started asking how he found out that they had ruined his wedding, what they should do now and, in general, whether they needed to run away urgently. But the boss replied that Winter hadn't come for that. He had come personally to give them an assignment. It was clear that there were good rumors about the agency's work. Maria, stuttering a little, asked what assignment. Librato smiled slyly and said that the Duke had asked him to find the pink-haired girl who had ruined his ceremony. And then he asked, "Isn't it a simple matter?" The girl, a little shocked, replied that they knew who the criminal was. The boss understood that this was not a task that he should accept out of the blue. This aristocrat was terrifying as hell. The boss added that the reward would be even better than the previous one. Avina grabbed her head. She realized that the boss had already accepted this task. There was nothing to be done. The money had to be earned somehow. Librato sat down next to her and told her not to worry. He hadn't given her dangerous missions. Maria frowned and thought that it hadn't been that long ago. Boss continued to say that the meeting place would be at the guild, so if something happened, she could call him. He touched her shoulder and tried to calm her down with a smile. Pappy noted that the chief was an outstanding swordsman and everything would be fine. The girl thought about it. If she completed the task, she would be able to pay all the interest at once and return her mother's box, and perhaps she would get rid of this crazy man once and for all. And she agreed. Maria wore a pink wig and a burgundy dress to the meeting. On the way, she decided that if she couldn't escape, she would break through an exit to escape. Duke Winter was already waiting for her in a chair. He crossed his arms over his chest as if he were dozing. The girl came up to him and said hello. The man opened his eyes and invited her to sit down. Avina sat down in the chair opposite. Taking a sip of tea, Maria asked his lordship how he was. She remarked that she had not expected him to find her in this way. The man replied that he had to. Then he added that he had been waiting for their meeting for a long time to talk to his baby. The girl choked on the word baby. Barry smiled. Avina tried to pull herself together. She wondered how much longer he would call her that. It was like a duel. She could just see the scene from Proud Minds where she and Winter were the main characters. The first round is set. The one with the strong spirit will win. The girl is ready for the game. The best defense is an attack. She propped her chin up, looked languidly at the Duke and asked if he remembered their hot night, since he missed her so much. The man rebuffed the attack, saying how could he forget such a thing, and then he added that he would like to hear from her lips what happened that night. She need not be shy. Maria did not even think of being afraid. She coughed into her fist and said that they had had such a hot time that when she woke up, her voice was hoarse and her whole body was tingling. It had been an unforgettable night. Winter listened with interest, propping up his head. The girl continued that, contrary to expectations, he suddenly decided to get married. She was upset and thought that this bore had completely forgotten about her. But he remembered everything. Avina theatrically shed a tear, saying that he, as if nothing had happened, had decided to arrange a wedding with another. And now, having come here, he says that he was looking for her. Looking at Barry with eyes full of tears, the actress stood up and, mock angrily pointing her finger at him, said that it was very impudent of him to say such a thing without any apologies. His lordship was staring at the show, his hands clasped under his chin. Maria asked him in her mind why he looked so gloomy. Was it really unpleasant to listen to all this? She hoped that this scoundrel would soon go mad and leave. Still crying, the girl said that she understood that she would not be able to tell the newborn baby the name of the father. And then she asked if he shared her feelings. The Duke needed to take proper responsibility for the wounds inflicted on her soul. Avina was jubilant. It turned out that the lady who had ruined his wedding was telling lies that were impossible to believe, and even demanding that he take responsibility for it all. She wanted to look crazy. Winter grinned and asked if this was what his little girl wanted. Then he knelt down before her and, taking her hand to his lips, apologized for not having the ring ready because he was in a hurry to meet her. Instead, he kissed her fingers and asked if she would marry him. Maria froze in surprise. She mentally repeated the word marry syllable by syllable. Then she loudly asked again, should she marry him? The man answered that she wanted him to take responsibility. The girl answered that it was so, but he didn't even know her name and was already proposing her hand and heart. The Duke said that the wedding was the last chance. It turned out to be the best way to find her. After a night spent together, the lady disappeared so quickly, without even telling her name. They met for the first time at that ball. When their eyes met, Barry knew without words. They were born to meet. He couldn't stop smiling when he talked to her. His Excellency even wondered why they, who were ideally suited to each other, had only met now. He wanted it. He was even ready to devote his entire life to her. Maria frowned and asked again what he was talking about. The Duke answered that she wouldn't know the day she had told him about. The girl realized that he was making it all up, but why? The man continued to tell about what happened next, their hot night. However, in the morning he opened his eyes and his baby was gone. He was looking for her like crazy. The lady muttered that he was still like that. Winter asked her what she had said. Avina replied that she was talking to herself and asked her to continue. Barry said that he had chosen the wedding because he believed that she would come when she heard the news. At the end he added that thanks to this decision, the girl was now sitting in front of him. Maria froze. She did not understand anything. He spoke so confidently it did not seem like he was lying. The lady fidgeted nervously with her fingers. She wondered if it might be true, but only for him. She stood up and asked the Duke if he had mistaken her for another pink-haired girl. The actress understood that if his lordship had really made a mistake, then everything would be easier to resolve than she thought. But the man, smiling, asked why she thought so. Maria answered because there were some differences with her memories. After all, to charm the Duke, you need a girl who is his equal. Her hands were shaking. The lady modestly lowered her gaze and added that then, since he had confused her even before the wedding, it was even more painful. Then she asked his opinion. What did he think? Winter smiled broadly, covering his face with his fist. He said that he understood her anxiety because he was quite popular. Then he approached Maria and, touching her face, tenderly said that he had met her. And he asked her not to worry. The girl understood that this couldn't be. It was simply impossible to break through him. No matter how hard she tried, he didn't even hesitate. Each prick returned even stronger. Avina even thought about opening up, saying that it was all a lie. But then he might get angry and it would be difficult to get by with just money. So she couldn't talk. Still stroking her face, Barry said that they were alone now and he had missed the warmth of that day. Maria touched his hand. She decided that the Duke's only weak point was. The girl kissed his fingers. Then she looked languidly into his eyes and asked how he was. The man was taken aback for a moment, and then put his arm around her waist. Avina was glad that he had taken the bait. She grabbed him by the lapels and asked if he could check if she was really the girl who shared her warmth with him. Maria moved her hands to his shoulders and pressed herself a little closer. The Duke froze. The girl smiled solemnly and looked straight into his eyes. She saw that he was confused, perhaps even speechless. So there was still a little left. Winter touched her face and said that she had started it and asked her to remember it. Avina did not have time to consider what this meant before his lordship pulled her close and kissed her. The lady was taken aback and did not understand what was going on and why he was kissing her. Her hands began to tremble, and then she confidently grabbed him by the neck. She really liked his kiss. She was completely defeated in this round. Barry pulled away from the astonished girl. Purring contentedly, he noticed that, as he had suspected, it was she. And then, wiping his lips, he asked if perhaps they had enough testing. Maria began to come to her senses. She took the Duke's head in her hands and pulled him towards her, saying, "Just a little longer." She knew she had made a mistake, but he was such a good kisser. Winter tried to hide his laughter by covering his mouth, but it didn't help much. The girl asked if he was laughing at her and blushed with shame. The man couldn't hold back his laughter anymore. He laughed and said that it wasn't so, but her longing face amused him. Avina, angry, asked why she couldn't want more. After all, they already had something more. His lordship agreed. Indeed, in their relations, a kiss was already a trifle. The lady was already on the verge of a breakdown, but she understood that there would be no benefit from running away. The Duke continued to advance. The first blow was what they would name their child. Maria countered that maybe he would ask her name first. The next blow was where they would spend their honeymoon. The lady tried to counterattack. She replied that there would be a landscape and they could kiss just like they had just now. But the enemy stubbornly pushed her to the edge of the cliff, until she fell, catching her hand on the edge. Only then did he say that he could give her whatever she wanted. The girl knew it was a total failure, but the Duke extended a helping hand to her, asking what she thought. Maria got the meaning of his words. She asked him again if he could really give her everything she wanted. Winter called her sweet and asked if he really looked like he was lacking something. It irritated her that he had hit the nail on the head. The man said he was ready. It didn't matter. A kiss, a hot night, whatever she wanted. The lady chuckled. She thought she had lost the duel, but her opponent was holding out his hand to seal the deal. Avina cursed silently at his suggestions of a hot night, a kiss. This was not what she wanted. He himself said that he would give her everything she wanted. The only reason she was here. Maria shook his hand and said, "Money." The Duke asked again. She repeated money again. Then she asked if he could give it to her if she wanted it. Barry frowned. The girl had thought at first that this was too vain, but if he fell out of love with her because of this, it would all be over. After all, that was what she had planned to do from the start. Then the Duke smiled and said that of course he would give it, because he had many of them. Then he added that his body, soul, and property were all hers from now on. Maria rejoiced. She even clenched her fists with joy. Now she and her father would be able to live in a new house and she would have her own cafe. All her problems would be solved. It was a perfect marriage. She knew she had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Seeing her hesitation, Barry asked the girl's answer to his proposal. The lady was still silent. Then the man suggested that she needed time or was not so convinced because there was no ring. His Excellency stood up and said that he was giving her half a month and not a day more. He could not stand it. He intended to leave the cafe, but Maria stopped him and asked if the next meeting would be in the same place. To which the Duke replied that it would probably be better to spend time in a more atmospheric place. And then he added that he would pick out a suitable ring for her. The girl was still looking at the closed door. Librato came up and asked how the conversation had gone. The lady was restless and lost in thought. She was worried about being exposed, so she needed to forge the documents properly. The boss asked what had happened. The girl mumbled that she needed to calm down. The boss didn't understand what was going on. He asked if something bad had happened and why she was so upset. Suddenly his gaze fell on the scratches on her wrist. He took Avina's hand and began to ask where this mark came from. Librato began to get angry because he thought that the Duke had done it. He asked again if Winter had beaten her. The girl reassured him and said that nothing of the sort had happened, and then she added that His Excellency had proposed to her. The chief's eyes bulged out of their sockets. He didn't believe what he heard. Avina told him that he had arranged the wedding to find her, and if he married her, he would give her everything she wanted. She knew what the boss would think of her, but for her it's not a bad option. So she wants to take everything to the last crumb. If he reveals her, then everything is over. Probably she will have to make false documents, come up with another name. Maria became sad. Although the Duke said that the girl with pink hair was undoubtedly her, it was risky to blindly believe his words. She decided to try and become a copy of that girl. The lady then told Librato that she had some other things to do and needed to go. She also asked when she should come for the money. The still shocked man replied that in 4 days. Avina took off her wig and waved goodbye, saying that they would see each other again. The man didn't move. He didn't understand what was happening. All he could think of was that Betty had proposed to Maria. A few weeks ago, Librato walked into a bar. The bartender greeted him and asked if he would be alone. The guest replied that someone else would be arriving soon and asked for 2 mugs as usual. Soon the Duke of Winter came up. The blonde greeted him as he had greeted Betty. His Excellency noticed that his friend had already ordered him a drink. Librato smiled and replied that he always ordered the same thing. Barry raised his glass and proposed a toast to his health. Then he asked how his friend was doing at work. The man replied that he was a little distracted due to the amount of work he had accumulated. The Duke confirmed that his friend had been very nervous when he opened his business, and asked if everything was okay now. Librato replied that everything was fine, but there was still a lot of trouble. Then Winter offered to do something with him. The blonde asked what exactly. The Duke asked to ruin the wedding. The guy was a little indignant. They don't ruin other people's celebrations. Then he added that even for a friend this was too much, no matter how vile his enemy was. His Excellency said that he did not say that she was a stranger. He meant his wedding. Labrado was surprised at first, then congratulated him. He cursed and added that he knew he liked him. But all this time he tried to pretend he didn't notice. Barry asked him what he was talking about. The blonde apologized and asked why he was doing all this and if his fiancée knew about it. The Duke propped his head, which had become painful, with his hand. He replied that this woman was the reason. She had slipped him a sleeping pill. Horrified, Labrado asked if that was why his friend was planning to publicly condemn her. Although she had done something wrong, his plan was too cruel, to which Winter replied that it was impossible to win a man's heart in such a way. He proposed to marry her, in order to shut the mouths of the Senate at the same time, and it was also necessary to destroy the rumors that his ideal was something puppyish, so that people would not be mistaken like him. Labrado exhaled sadly, and noticed that Barry was in a very bad mood. Then he smiled, took a sip of alcohol, and said he was sorry. He had hoped that His Excellency would become his other half. The Duke narrowed his eyes and replied that it would not happen. He had to accept it. The guy took another sip of his drink, and said that the fruit organization would handle the task, but it would be expensive. A job that required ruining the reputation of an influential person like the Duke was not cheap, and he has just the right person in first place, according to the employer's reviews. She is their trump card. Then Labrado asked humorously and mock-officially if the customer thought he would need a premium for the precise and accurate execution of the work. Barry smiled and said he would give as much as needed. The blonde said it was a pleasure to negotiate with him and offered to sign the contract. He was pulled out of his memories by Pappy, who asked if the boss was feeling well. The boss replied that everything was fine. He couldn't accept that his Betty had proposed to Maria. Labrado leaned his head on his hand and stared at one spot. This wasn't in the contract. The secretary asked to look at the documents. Upon returning home, the Duke was met by his assistant Jenkins. She asked him where he had been going lately and not telling her. The man replied that he had been in Labrado's organization. Did he really have to report even such trifles? The girl exclaimed that, of course, because she needed to know her schedule to settle things properly. Besides, this organization, after all, His Excellency went there to meet the girl who ruined his wedding. There will be a fuss in the Senate because of this. It is unknown what he is thinking. Winter said she looked like a nagging wife. However, he would soon have a real spouse. The assistant did not understand what he meant. His lordship replied that he had proposed. He needed to marry quickly before the Senate was in an uproar. But the girl he had chosen. Jenkins was furious. He had decided that without saying a word. And that girl. The Duke had gone mad. She is against it. But the man calmly replied that he does not care about her opinion about his wedding. The girl's mood drooped. She replied that, to be honest, she has no reason to object to him. However, it is her job to find him a fabulous bride. And since she is his assistant, it is her responsibility to do everything for him. Barry said he knows she cares about him. That's why he marries the one he wants. Jenkins, still sad, handed the documents to the chief and said that she had found information about her. His lordship opened the file. It was stated there that she was Maria Avina, daughter of Baron Avina. However, due to her father's passion for gambling, the family's financial situation is deplorable. Therefore, now they are no different from commoners. The man scratched his chin thoughtfully as he looked through the papers. He remembered the actress asking him for money. Now he understood why. He asked his assistant to prepare some documents. In the evening, there was dinner at the Avenue house. Maria cut the omelet and saw meat inside. She asked her father in surprise what it was. After all, there was always only greenery there. The man replied that he had gathered his strength and saved up some money. And since it was so delicious, it was worth it. Then he lowered his head and apologized again. He said that if it weren't for that woman's temptation, he would cook delicious food for his daughter every day. The girl blurted out "that woman" with her mouth full. She caught herself and added that it just slipped out. After finishing her meal and washing it down with water, Maria said that it was perfectly normal for him to meet someone new. After all, it had been 10 years since his mother had died. It was his life. He shouldn't worry about her. He should live as he wishes, only without gambling. The father replied that he had rethought everything. The girl said that she had heard this many times before. The man asked to believe him this time. Then, remembering, he took out an envelope and said that the invitation was for his daughter. Maria, wiping her lips after eating, asked who it was from. Her father said that it was from the Barbaros family for a banquet. They really want her to come. The girl asked if this was the same Barbarossa, Nesti's son. The father confirmed and said that the event would be in a week. He added that he would prepare a new dress for her somehow, so that she would not worry and have fun. But Maria replied that she was not even thinking of going there. The man was indignant that she was saying such things. Even if it was his fault that they had gone down, he was a baron and she was his daughter. Tears came to his eyes. It was entirely his fault that she was not being treated properly. And he really was very sorry. The girl finally agreed to go. The baron was delighted and began to fuss about finding money for the outfit. He asked his daughter to go to the market the next day. The lady thoughtfully lowered her head onto her crossed hands. She realized that Barry Winter might also come to this banquet. Even if they met, he would not be able to recognize her. But she was still worried. Maria was leaving yet another store, covered with bags. It seemed to her that she had bought up the entire assortment of the stores. The Duke asked if his dear was satisfied. He thought that a dress from the next store would suit her. The girl happily adjusted her sunglasses and remarked that shopping was like hunting. And then she saw her next target. The man laughed. As expected, she was already a pro at relaxing. After another purchase, Barry asked what she thought about food after the hunt. He had made reservations at all the nearby restaurants. Avina said he was a brave man who wasn't afraid of cancellation fees. And of course, this man chose her. They tried several different cuisines. The lady was full. Winter asked if the baby in her tummy had eaten everything. After all, she could order as much food as she wanted. Maria, wiping her lips with a napkin, ordered dessert as well. His Excellency approved of the idea, and then asked why she continued to say that the child existed if it did not. The girl woke up with horror. Her hands were clutching the blanket and her heart was beating faster. She realized with joy that it was just a dream. After meeting the Duke, she was looking for any information about the pink-haired girl like crazy. But there were still no results. She probably started having nightmares because of it. If she didn't find something as soon as possible, she wouldn't be able to sleep anymore. Since she couldn't, maybe the boss could. The conversation in the office went wrong from the very beginning. Librato categorically forbade agreeing to the Duke's proposal. He even crossed his fingers to enhance the effect. Maria said that she had not yet decided, but if it worked out, it would bring in huge amounts of money. After all, every coin was important. After all, a plot of land with a house could be bought someday. The boss replied that he understood her, but did not recommend agreeing. Firstly, it was dangerous. The girl said that she was ready for it from the very beginning, but the boss noticed that he wasn't just talking about the danger to her. The organization's reputation could be shaken. Secondly, they had already found the girl he was looking for, so if they came and said that this was not the girl, nothing good would come of it. Avina realized with disappointment that this was true. The man muttered that even if she insisted that she was the real one, then, frowning, he added that there would be something else important. She would be charged a commission for expenses. Maria was shocked. She exclaimed that she was an employee of the organization and he wanted to take money from her. The boss grinned and replied that, of course. She didn't think that everything was free. Besides, the risk was also included in the assignment. The girl asked if it could be deducted from her reward, but the boss said no, because she would go into the minus. Then he said that was enough talk for today and added that she should not worry. As soon as a profitable order was in sight, he would immediately pass it on to her. Maria lowered her head. She knew that Librato was right. She couldn't risk the organization. She had to continue her search alone. The lady wished there was some way to get information. The boss opened another letter. There was an invitation from the National Slum Society. It dawned on the girl. The event was a rumored place that was gold for a spy. A few days later, Maria attended a meeting of the Barbaros family. The entire room was buzzing with talk of the Duke and his beloved. Everyone was wondering who she was, what kind of family she was, whether she would come today. The girl calmly sipped champagne with a smile and listened attentively to the guests. She thought that everyone would only talk about this. It was too bad, of course, that there were no people there who had seen everything in person. The lady looked very elegant in the blue long dress that her father had bought at the market. She thought that she would really be in danger if she failed again. That time she actually managed to fool the Duke with her acting skills. Her thoughts were interrupted by Nesti Barbaros. He greeted her and thanked her for accepting the invitation. Maria curtsied and said in response that she should thank him for the invitation, and she thought that she did not know why she was invited. The man asked permission to talk in private. Nesty said that he was waiting for the right moment to confess his true feelings to her. The girl was shocked and asked if he was flirting with her. The guy confirmed that he was in love with her. The lady asked where he had seen her. The aristocrat was a little indignant and asked if feelings necessarily needed a reason. After all, Nesty Barbaros himself was courting her. Maria didn't understand. They had never met before this greeting. It was strange. The man asked why she was focusing so much on it. He looked at her sarcastically and muttered that she was acting like a rich woman, although she didn't have a penny to her name. The girl asked him again what he had said. Nesty called her a young lady who couldn't wear anything better than a second-rate cheap dress. She must be crazy that he showed interest in her. The lady's eyes widened. Her father told her that this dress was considered a banquet dress, even though he bought it at the market. He apologized and said that all the good outfits were sold out, and only this one was left. The dress is modest, but she will definitely stand out in it. Maria grabbed Barbaros by the lapels and asked if he was crazy. The guy spread his arms to the side and asked what she was doing, because he was thinking about her. He loved her so much that he couldn't resist. Then a hand fell on his shoulder from behind, and an icy voice said that he was a very jealous man. Then the Duke approached Nesty's ear and asked what he wanted from the girl to whom he had proposed. The girl was almost paralyzed. This couldn't be. He wouldn't recognize her. But Winter turned his gaze to her and greeted his darling. The lady almost screamed and began to cover her face. Barry pushed Barbarossa away and said she looked even more beautiful in this guise. But Maria began to say that he was mistaken. His Excellency approached the lady and whispered if she was Maria Avena, daughter of Baron Avena and a prominent employee of the fruit organization. The girl was shocked and asked how. The man replied that it was not difficult at all. He could find out anything he wanted. The guests immediately began to talk when they heard the Duke address her as, "my dear." So she was the beloved. Winter smiled and noticed that his sweetheart had managed to do a lot. Substitute guests, illegally return money, and even secretly investigate the affairs of aristocrats. Maria began to panic. She had already decided that it was all over. Her brain was feverishly searching for a way out of the situation. Pretend that she knew nothing, find the pros and cons, or run away again. The main question was how she would survive. Meanwhile, Barry asked what he should do with her. The girl was clenching and unclenching the fabric of her dress. She simply said, "Sorry." Then she explained that she had been doing her job at first, and since she needed money, she had to deceive him once more. She lowered her head and quietly said that she was not the one he was looking for. The Duke looked at her intently. Then he said that when he says, "What should he do with someone?" people usually start begging for mercy, and the bastards who don't have the guts try to run away. But she really always acts contrary to his expectations. He extended his hand to her, saying that he had something to tell her, and suggested that they step away for a moment. Moving into a separate room, Maria froze at the door. The Duke, looking back, asked why she froze and said that there was no need to be afraid. The girl was not sure of this. She could almost see the lightning flashing around him. Avena decided to just apologize calmly first. She said she was very sorry for dishonoring him and ruining his reputation, and also that taking advantage of the situation, she decided to get a benefit. It will be difficult for her to repay with money, however, in another way. Barry interrupted her, saying that he had already thought of how she would repay him. That's why they are here. She must agree to his proposal. The lady was confused. She asked why he was proposing, knowing her true identity, to the girl who had ruined his wedding for money. His lordship replied that he understood everything, and she was his salvation then. More precisely, his proposal was not just an ordinary wedding. He proposed a contract marriage within a year. Maria asked why he was suggesting this. The man replied that there were too many people who were forcing him to marry. That day, if it weren't for her, he would have already been married. Then the Duke added that he was rich and her family had huge debts. The girl involuntarily hiccuped. His Excellency asked if she understood what he meant. The lady replied that if he married her, he would be freed from the pressure of marriage, and she from debt. Barry, smiling, summed up that they would both then be free. Then he added that she was going to marry him anyway. She would have to wear a wig and makeup all the time for fear of being found out. Better to leave everything and start over. It was so easy. Winter dug into his inside pocket and said he had another contract ready. Although he didn't say it, he had lost something: fame, trust, reputation. And there are also rumors that he is now chasing after every skirt. Therefore, after discussing everything with a lawyer, he realized that he would have to demand compensation in the amount of 1 billion gold. Avina realized that she was cornered. He had planned everything in advance and had no intention of giving her a choice from the start. Snatching the marriage contract from him, the girl happily said that marriage sounded very good indeed. Then she added that she needed to read the contract carefully, so that was all for today. The Duke replied that he could not let her go again. She had no idea how long he had waited for her decision. Maria realized that she needed to move quickly, but something didn't work. His Excellency asked with a smile about the success of her teleportation. Then he pointed to the magic seals all over the room. He said he needed an answer today. He snapped his fingers, causing a blue swirl of control magic to envelop her hand. Barry decided to help her first. He dipped her finger in the ink but said that of course only she could decide where to place the seal. It could be a contract worth 1 billion gold pieces, or guaranteeing a huge benefit within a year, a wedding contract. She can put her stamp wherever she wants. Maria practically shouted that she agreed to the marriage. Winter was pleased with the result of the deal. Already in the carriage, he asked if his dear was happy. The girl noted that she had not even been able to read the terms of the contract. The man replied that he could assure her that there were no points that were disadvantageous to her. When she returned home, she would be able to check everything calmly. He happily closed his eyes and said that there would be a lot to do tomorrow. Avina asked about the girl with pink hair. Barry replied that she played it so realistically that he had to match it. The lady remarked that he could become a writer. Then Maria asked why her. Winter looked out the window and replied that he thought she was a good fit. She wouldn't slip something into his drink out of her mad love. The girl was surprised and asked if there was anyone who had done this to him. The man thoughtfully answered that it was possible. Looking at the nightlights outside the window, the lady noticed that there were many strange people in the world. Winter smiled and said that she too seemed to him to be a very strange person. Then he reached into his pocket and, saying that he had almost forgotten, pulled out a box. It turned out to be a beautiful engagement ring with a blue stone. The man said that he tried to pick a ring to match her. The girl asked him to wait. Barry wondered what had happened again. Then he took out a ring. With the words, "Maria Avina, I ask you to be my wife for a year," he put the ring on her finger. When they arrived at her house, it was raining. The lady thanked him for giving her a ride to such a distant place. The man walked her home under a large umbrella. She asked when the wedding ceremony would take place. The Duke asked how she would react if he said tomorrow. Maria asked if it was a joke. His lordship laughed. He said that her expression was just as he had imagined. After bringing her home, Winter said that he was leaving then. When he turned around, the girl saw that his sleeve and shoulder were wet. Checking the hem of his dress, she noticed that it was dry. It turns out that he deliberately tilted the umbrella so that she would not get wet at all. This man is really strange. After the Duke and Maria left, the guests at Barbarossa's house continued to discuss the news. Questions poured in from all sides. Even Nesty got it. Everyone thought he had been abandoned. He made his way through the crowd of guests, irritated that things had gone wrong. It had suddenly emerged that Avina was His Excellency's mistress. The woman ordered him to seduce the Baron's daughter and play with her for a while. The guy got even angrier because he didn't know what to say to her. The next morning, the Baron met his daughter in the living room. With a smile on his face, he asked how the event had gone. He noticed that many years had passed since she was a child. At that time, there was no debut in her personal relationships. Maria answered in general terms that the event was interesting. Father chuckled suspiciously. The girl frowned and asked what kind of strange laughter. The man pressed his hands to his face and replied that he had seen everything yesterday. How she walked so amiably with the neat young man. The girl, stuttering, asked again. The Baron confirmed and added that he was happy to remember the time spent with her mother. Their daughter had grown up so much. Then he asked if she would marry him. Maria quickly hid her hands behind her back. She was confused and quickly changed the subject, saying that they would talk later, but now she needed the address of the creditor. She hoped that this damned Vant had not done anything to the box, had not broken it or sold it. Although at first glance it doesn't look very good, there shouldn't be any difficulties in paying off the debt. Holding the envelope in her hands, The girl told her father that this creditor would be the last scoundrel if he did not leave her alone even after the money was returned. The Baron agreed. As she walked towards her goal, Avina thought that she didn't care who this Vant was. After all, she would pay off the interest and never get involved with him again. Today was the end of a life in which a lady pays off debts. If she has money, she will renovate the house and change the furniture. And then she will buy the most expensive plot of land in the capital and open a cozy cafe. This marriage is $1 million chance to become rich. Maria believed that this time she would fulfill her dream. She approached a large building. The establishment looked like a fortress. The girl doubted the correctness of the place. But after checking the address, she realized that everything was correct. It turns out that this coffee shop is a disguise. Anything is possible because the fruit organization also disguises itself as a weapons store. As the lady walked in, she thought that this damned creditor had opened a coffee shop with the money she had saved. She then decided that she would build a 2-story cafe next to it. She had to do it for the sake of honest small business owners. The girl turned to the staff. They greeted her. The voice seemed familiar. The man was standing with his back to her, tying his apron. He asked if she needed help choosing. Then he turned around and offered a recommendation from the barista. It was the bald creditor. Maria was lounging behind the bar. She asked if he recognized her. They had a quick chat. Then she asked him to report to the boss. The bartender asked what she was talking about. Avina thought that perhaps he did not recognize her, because it was dark in the house. She remembered that her father had said in the morning that to get to the main one you need a password. Then the lady, leaning one arm on the bar, said that she was ordering their entire menu from start to finish, and added that she would tip 5 times as much. The barista's face immediately changed and he told her to follow him. They left the cafe and went into a long corridor. Maria looked around. The coffee shop seemed smaller inside than outside because of this place. The man took off his apron as he walked. He said she came faster than he expected. The girl got angry and asked why he ignored her, since he recognized her. The bald man answered that he was still a barista behind the counter. His pride does not allow him to ruin the aromatic coffee along with the smiles of the customers. The girl thought that this was the voice of the one who spat in someone else's house. Approaching the door, they stopped. The man pointed here. Opening the door, she saw Vance sitting with a cup of coffee. The man looked back and commented that she had come and not even gotten lost. Then he said that they had not seen each other for a long time and asked how things were. Irritated, Maria immediately asked if everything was okay with the box. The brunette replied with annoyance that he felt somehow offended because she hadn't even said hello, but was already looking for the box. He offered her to sit down for a conversation. The lady saw the box on the coffee table. She threw him an envelope with money and offered to count it, but there was an exact amount. Avina hurried to the treasured box but stumbled and falling hit the box. Vant managed to catch the girl and she didn't fall flat on the floor. Looking into her eyes, he jokingly asked where she was rushing to and not looking under her feet. Of course, he didn't mind catching her. Maria muttered thank you, but her gaze was fixed on the overturned box. The man noticed this and hastened to reassure her, saying that he had packed the box securely. Running up to the treasured thing, she made sure that he had told the truth. The brunette asked how she knew that the box was in the box. The girl answered that it was a premonition. Then she asked him if he had counted the money. If everything was in order, she would go. Vant noted that a specialist like him would know with one glance that the amount was correct. But there was another problem. The lady asked warily which one. The man held a cup of coffee in one hand and a coffee pot in the other. He replied that the kettle was full. Smiling, the creditor added that he vouched for the taste. And then he suggested that they go after a cup of coffee. Maria agreed. After trying the drink, she agreed that it was indeed delicious. Vant said that this was coffee from a person who won first place in a barista competition. Avina asked in surprise if he really participated in such competitions. The man laughed and replied that it was not him, but his Lysic. It was difficult to find a gifted person. The lady was even more surprised. She thought he was a servant who did everything he was told, but it turns out his main job is making coffee. The brunette added that the barista managed to give the coffee an exquisite taste. After a couple of sips, Vant asked if it looked like a date, since they were sitting opposite each other drinking coffee. Maria said no. Then, leaning slightly, the man actually suggested going on a date. The girl firmly refused. He began to persuade her, offering shopping, delicious food, and wine. Avina asked, "What if she doesn't want to go on a date with the creditor?" To which Vant asked again, "What if she doesn't want to go on a date with the director of the coffee shop?" Maria silently showed her finger with the wedding ring. Having finished her coffee, she stood up and thanked them for preserving the box. Now she had nothing to do with this headquarters. The creditor suggested that she come to them occasionally, and the coffee would be free for her. At the door, Lady looked back and promised to think about it. The door slammed behind her, and Vant remained sitting with a dreamy expression on his face. The assistant reported that Avina had left. The brunette thanked Sean. Then he lay down on the sofa and, covering his face with a book, said, "Interesting person." The bald man asked again, did he seriously think so? The boss confirmed and then added that she was not his type at all, but for some reason he wants to know more about her. Picking up the book from his face, Vant asked himself why Maria was so hateful to her. Tying his apron back on, Sean announced that it looked like she had arrived. The brunette sat down on the couch and asked for more coffee. A few minutes later, he opened the door, inviting her inside. There were several turning points in Maria's life. The first was when her mother died. The second was when her father lost all his property due to his passion for gambling. And the third was when she began to pretend to be the Duke's wife. A crowd of journalists had gathered outside the Baron's house. They were shouting out a bunch of questions. Was it true that she was Barry Winter's secret lover? Was she really carrying the Duke's child? How did they meet? And many more, including recommendations for restaurants they like. The girl watched this gathering through the window. She was indignant that they were already boring her, and did not understand how they could behave like that. His lordship replied that the news of their marriage was very loud, and that in order for them to separate, they needed to be given what they wanted. The girl asked if he was hinting at an interview. The man replied that he was not at all. He put his arm around the bride's shoulders and opened the door. Barry asked the journalists why they had come. The press immediately began asking if the Duke was always with Maria. Winter ignored the questions and continued to say that they were working in such hot weather, and they had better leave it. Because his darling was shaking like a leaf, he held the bride's head close to him and said that her head was buzzing because of the noise. Camera flashes immediately started to work, capturing the heated moment, and the crowd dispersed almost immediately. Some shouted that it would be their exclusive. Others claimed that they would be the first to publish it. A few minutes later, they were gone without a trace. Avina was surprised that they ran away so quickly. The Duke noted that the printing houses would burn for several more days. As she walked back into the house, the girl was outraged by this nightmare that had been going on since midday. Barry asked if she was really dizzy. Maria said of course not, then asked why he had come. The man replied that she had forgotten to do something before the wedding. Avina was confused and asked what exactly. The pleased Duke said that she had forgotten to introduce him to her father. The girl brought a glass of water for his lordship and placed it on the table in front of him. The man thanked her and said that she would help him gather his courage. Jenkins was standing nearby with a sour expression on her face. Maria wondered who this person with the impressively creepy wrinkles was who kept staring at her. Winter replied that she was his assistant. They would see each other often now, so the girl shouldn't hate her too much. The assistant was barely holding back. Her body was shaking from the tension. Finally, she broke down and began to tell Avina that she did not respect the Duke because she sat him on a dirty sofa and did not even bring him tea. The hostess replied, "Who was she to say such a thing?" Jenkins continued to attack, saying that she had taken advantage of the unexpected situation, seduced the Duke with her luxurious appearance, but she could not be fooled. Maria shouted that she had not seduced anyone. The assistant did not calm down and said that his lordship could not entice her. He was not like that. Winter did not know how to react to all this fuss between women. He asked Jenkins to be more polite. The women were already in a fistfight. And then he added that you can't yell at pregnant women. The assistant started to stutter and Avina was surprised. This man, even knowing that it was a bluff, still said such things. So she decided to play along. Making a miserable face, she asked if her guest was very surprised, since her face looked very scared. The Duke burst out laughing. At that moment the Baron came in. He asked with horror what his daughter was talking about. The man fell to his knees, exclaiming that this marriage was really because of an unexpected pregnancy. He felt sick. After a while, leaving the Baron under Jenkins's care, Maria and his lordship were left alone in the living room. The man offered to talk while her father came to his senses. He asked her how she felt about looking at the contract again. It would be good to go over it thoroughly together. Smiling, the girl took out the envelope and grumbled that she had been forced to put a stamp on it first, and was only now being asked to read it. Barry told her not to pick on her. Avina opened the document. It stated that the duration of the marriage was 1 year. However, by agreement of the two parties, the term could either be reduced or increased. During marriage, each respects the privacy of the other. However, one should not contradict one's moral principles. Further, that Barry Winter is obliged to provide Maria with a reward. The next point stated that the people bound by this contract are obliged to maintain equal relations. Also, more conditions can be added to the document after discussing it with the other party. Both parties are required to maintain complete confidentiality. Also, if one of the parties discloses the terms of the contract without the consent of the other party, the party that did so must be held accountable. And the last point was not to love each other. If one of the parties falls in love with the other, the contract marriage automatically ends. The Duke asked her what she thought. The girl replied that it was written clearly and neatly, but no fool would dare to bet $1 billion on it. The man said that he was glad that she was pleased. Avina confirmed, but said she would add a couple more points. Winter asked which ones. In the first point, she stated that the Duke bore full responsibility for the cause of the divorce. The second point stated that if Maria became the Duke's wife, the key to his safe would become common. However, she had to discuss the purpose of its use with her husband. Handing him the document, the lady asked what Barry would say. The man chuckled and asked why. Regarding the first point, they would both end up getting the status of divorced. Avina, fiddling with her fingers, replied that she would be at a greater disadvantage than he. Only that part would be on his conscience. Wittner put the paper on the table and remarked that it was impudent, but he agreed anyway. Maria thought that everything had gone even better than she had expected. Then she asked if the second point needed to be explained. His lordship thought about it. He had not thought that she would demand it so openly. The girl grinned and replied that if he didn't like it, he could refuse. But the Duke agreed. The lady was even surprised. Barry asked why she was so surprised. He agreed to entrust the key to the safe. Then he asked her if she had anything else to add. Avina replied that this was all she could think of. Then she asked if the point about not falling in love was serious. The man asked if there were any problems or if she was thinking about loving him. Maria said that there was not a single thought. She just did not understand why it was necessary to add this to the mandatory points. The Duke asked why. The lady meant that it was cool that he was so confident. Suddenly, the Baron's voice was heard from behind. He was calling his daughter. The girl turned around and saw her father, supported by Jenkins. The old man was wrapped in a blanket. He apologized for fainting from surprise. The daughter, hiding the contract in her bag, replied that it was nothing to worry about. At this point, the Duke stood up. He said that he was late in introducing himself. Then he bowed and introduced himself. He said that he should have come to the father first, and only then notified his daughter. His Excellency apologized for taking so long. The Baron sat down on the sofa. He was shocked that the Duke himself was deciding his daughter's fate. Winter, who was sitting opposite him, said that with his permission he would like to marry Maria. The father asked his daughter's opinion. He would be happy if she married a good man. But this wedding was because of the birth of a child, so he was worried that the young couple made such a decision in the midst of the turmoil. The father asked directly if the girl wanted to marry the Duke. Avina sat thoughtfully. After listening to her father, she began to realize the full weight of her decision. She will play Winter's wife and lie to everyone, including her dad. And after the divorce, she will be imprinted as the Duke's ex-wife. This will probably be the most important turning point in her life. Maria was not sure if she could. The Baron turned to her again. The girl hesitated a little, but still said clearly that she wanted to marry him. She thought that in any case it was better than her life now. The man smiled and said, "Okay." Then he turned to his future son-in-law. He said that maybe he heard from Maria, but she was not his real daughter. They couldn't have a child, and while they were thinking about adoption, they found a homeless girl. Something about her caught the couple's attention. That child should never have been born, but they felt a sense of duty and decided that they had to take care of her and give her love. The Baron sighed sadly. He was a bad father. He took the child and became a burden himself. He has no right to talk about his daughter's choice at all. However, he sincerely wishes for her to be happy. Then he lowered his head and asked the Duke to make her happy no matter what. The girl was embarrassed, and Barry replied that of course he would do everything to make his daughter the happiest in the world. The father smiled and said that it might be too early, but it wouldn't be so bad to have grandchildren. Maria grimaced, and the Duke replied that of course. As they left the house, the man said that his darling had done well. The girl retorted that she was his equal. Barry asked what they would do next. Avina replied that she had a dress shoot, jewelry selection, and other things to do. His lordship stopped and asked if she had time in a week. The lady wondered what he was asking about. Winter replied that if she had no urgent matters, she should find a free day and they would hold the wedding ceremony. Maria said no problem, and thought that she should take a photo with her dad. Avina and the Duke inspected the house. The realtor praised the location. She assured that everything necessary was nearby: a 24-hour store, a market, an academy, a hospital. The city was close and the mansion was new. The only downside was the price, a bit expensive. His lordship was indignant. Was the high price a disadvantage? He asked if she knew who he was. The woman threw up her hands and replied that of course she did, and she just wanted to say that it was no problem at all for such a respectable gentleman. Since there were no shortcomings, then there was nothing better than home. Winter asked the bride if she agreed. At this time, Maria was diligently examining the window frame. The man asked why she was clinging to the window. The girl replied that she was assessing the condition of the house. The windows are all right. The plumbing is fine too, that is mold. The realtor noticed that the Duke's wife is very meticulous. It all started in the morning when the future son-in-law brought her father a statue as a gift. But it turned out to be big, and it was necessary to damage the doorframe to bring it in. But the Baron insistently asked not to destroy anything in the house. Then the Duke promised to find a bigger place to live within a day. Maria replied that they were choosing a house for her father, and so she would worry about everything. Barry approached the bride and asked his dear not to search so hard, since the agency assured her. But the girl replied that he didn't understand anything. There were a lot of swindlers in this area. The man asked if she really thought there would be people who would dare to cheat in front of him. Avina looked at him. Yes, this man was crazy, dangerous, and scary with immeasurable wealth and power. She said no, they would regret it 1,000,000 times. The Duke smiled and said, as expected, she knew him very well. Already in the carriage, the girl asked how long he would call her dear. Winter asked what he should call her then. The lady replied that she had a name. The man replied, yes, dear Maria. She snorted and told him to call her by any name he wished. Then it dawned on her, and the girl asked if she could call him by any name she wished. His lordship was intrigued. He asked if she was thinking of giving him a nickname. Maria scratched her chin thoughtfully. Then she asked how about princess. The Duke froze in surprise and then asked if that meant he was as beautiful as a princess. Avina used a play on words. She explained that Terror's jaw, if shortened, would be Upas. Then she started having fun, choosing different names to address him. For example, His Highness Upas or Mr. Upas. The man laughed and said that she could call him whatever she wanted. Looking at the scenery outside the window, Maria said that Upas might not walk her home today. Barry asked the reason. The girl asked to stop at the traffic light. She wanted to go into the organization. Since it would be difficult for her to work for a year, she had to inform them in advance. Then she remembered and asked again whether this would not be contrary to the terms of the contract. The Duke replied that no. In this case, it was better to tell the truth, but warn him to keep it a secret. As she got out of the carriage, the lady cheerfully wished Upas a safe journey. Winter smiled sweetly and said that he would pick her up at the same time tomorrow. The girl said that it was fine and headed towards the organization's building. Labrado worked on paperwork in his office. He noted that orders had increased compared to last month, but profits remained the same. He leaned back in his chair and began to stretch his neck. Maria crept up silently and greeted loudly, startling the boss. He jumped in surprise and saw a girl chewing cookies from behind. The boss asked when she arrived. Avina replied that she had 3 minutes ago, but he was so focused that she decided not to disturb him. But Pappy asked to speak to the boss, since he had been working several nights in a row. So Maria asked him why. Did he really have so much to do? The man replied that everything was fine. He didn't want to burden anyone with it. Then Labrado looked at the girl and narrowed his eyes a little. Maybe he should load his best employee after all. He asked if she had any assignments now. Avina smiled and said she had something to talk about. The boss looked at her attentively, propping up his head. Seeing that the secretary was making tea, they asked her to bring them some too. The lady explained the situation. The chief clarified that she had decided to be married to the Duke for a year. Maria confirmed and said that only he knew about it, so it will be difficult for her to carry out tasks at the moment. She apologized that it happened at such a difficult time. Librato replied that it was not about that. The lady did not realize how dangerous it was. He asked if she knew everything about him. She searched for information but found only common facts, that he was an only son, did not trust people. The chief asked if Barry knew what tasks she carried out. Maria just exhaled. The boss said that there was another problem here. If something happened to her, he wouldn't be able to stand up for her. The girl sadly answered that she knew. It was her personal business. Then she added that she had no intention of endangering the organization. Liberato was angry. He was not talking about the organization, but about her. Her honor, her reputation, even her future would never be the same. The man asked why she was taking it so lightly. Avina angrily asked if he thought she hadn't thought about it at all. She knew what the consequences of her decision would be. The boss replied that she hadn't even said a word to him, initially not taking the proposal seriously. If she had known, then... But Maria interrupted him, asking if she should consult with him. Librato looked at her in surprise. The girl continued to say that it was her business. This marriage was Maria Avina's business, and she pointed her hand at herself. He may be the head of the organization, but this was her personal life. She has no reason to discuss personal matters. The man clenched his fist. He said seriously that it was really her business. Then she would have a year's break. There were enough workers, so there was no problem. She shouldn't worry. Then, getting up, he added that if he really needed the help of his best employee, he would contact her. The girl tried to say something, but the boss suggested finishing for today. Maria, confused, agreed. Pappy came into the office with cups of tea. He apologized for the long wait. The guy was surprised to find only the boss in the office. He asked where Maria was. Liberato replied that she had left and that he was very late. The secretary asked what to do with the tea then, since he had poured enough for both. The chief suggested that they drink it together, which was unlike him. The man thought about it. He understood why Betty needed to marry, and he knew that he would do nothing bad to Maria. He also knew that the girl was not frivolous. She took even the smallest assignment seriously. It's a shame she left the organization, but the other guys are good too. They have nothing to worry about. But why? His thoughts were interrupted by the secretary's remark that Avina had made a mess on the couch. She felt right at home in the boss's office. Librato laughed and replied that it was Maria. The guy asked if she was like that on the first day. The boss confirmed and said that he was very nervous, but when he saw the girl, he calmed down. Pappy said that everyone would like to act like that, but only she does. Taking a sip of tea, the boss agreed. Only Maria can lie here comfortably. 5 years ago, 17-year-old Avina sat reservedly on this sofa and did not even touch her tea and cookies. The future boss asked why she wasn't eating. She didn't even lay a finger on him. The girl mumbled something. The man looked at her suspiciously and asked if she needed something else. Librato was flooded with memories from 5 years ago. It had been winter. He had just turned 22. He had had a huge fight with the guild leader over an unfair deal. The guy was interested in why the boss didn't warn that the people who signed the contract would be mired in huge debts. He knew from the very beginning that this would happen. After all, Alfred's house was among the victims. It was a boy who delivered newspapers. The chief, without even turning to him, asked what he was worried about. It wasn't the first time. Rez had suffered an acquaintance and now his conscience was bothering him. The guy wanted to object, but the boss barked that enough was enough. Then he added that the blonde was not up to the job. Librato suggested that he should probably leave. He wanted to help the boy and his father who were waiting outside the door. The chief said he had nothing to talk to him about. No one had asked anyone to fall for the scam. The young man closed the door behind him and went outside. He breathed in the frosty air and silently walked along the city streets. A couple of blocks later, Librato came across a girl and 2 guys. The atmosphere between them was clearly tense. One of the guys was holding a club. The girl, almost a child, said that they had agreed on something else. But the guy said it didn't matter. If there was interest, it had to be paid on time. and let him just try to miss the deadline again. The girl said she had paid everything back on time, but they did it their way. The blonde realized that he was dealing with creditors. The guy with the club got angry and, saying that she was talking complete nonsense, swung his weapon. But Labrado managed to parry the blow with his sword, hiding the girl behind him. The guy said that he didn't know what was going on, but that attacking the girl together was too much. He dealt another blow and neutralized the bandits. Like a true knight, the guy covered the girl with his body and said that he didn't want to see that again. The creditors quickly packed up and went home. He then asked the victim if she didn't know how dangerous the area was. The girl replied that they had called her. Labrado took a closer look at the girl. She looked to be about 16 or 18. Dark hair, big green eyes. She didn't look like an academy student. Then the brunette came to her senses and thanked him for his help. And then she added that she would probably go. The guy stopped her. Scratching the back of his head in awkwardness, he said that suddenly she would run into those bullies again, so he suggested that they have a snack in his office. That's how Maria ended up in Labrado's office. He sat her down on the sofa. He put tea and cookies on the table. The guy suggested having a snack while this was happening, and the soup was heating up and would be ready in about 3 minutes. While hanging up her coat, he insisted that she eat something. Otherwise it would get cold. And then he would take her home before it got dark. He also added that she should not get involved with bandits again. A little embarrassed by the situation in the office, Labrado said that no one had been there for a long time. There were masks and wigs on the shelves, and documents were scattered here and there. Looking back, he noticed that the girl had not touched her food. He asked if she didn't like soup. Then it dawned on him. He switched the plates and started eating first so she wouldn't worry. After eating a couple of spoons, he offered her to try it again, because if it got cold, it wouldn't be tasty. She finally agreed. After trying the first spoon, Maria was delighted with the taste. She quickly finished the soup and started on the tea. After taking a couple of sips of tea, the girl turned to the man. The guy laughed and said that he had just recently turned 20, so she can call him by his name. Then she told Mr. Labrado that she had a question. The blonde asked what it was. Maria wondered because he worked for the organization. The guy was surprised how she figured it out. He noticed that her head was working well, and then asked how she figured it out. The girl answered that it was enough to look around the room. Besides the documents, she saw things for disguise. Labrado chuckled. Usually people think that it is for the theater, but she is smart. Maria asked if she did not have talent. She got the information from a member of the organization. The guy froze with a spoon in his hand. He asked if she was interested in this job. The girl said yes, and that's why he could introduce her. Labrado stood up and said that since she had finished eating, they needed to go. Maria tried to convince him that she had eaten very little and wanted to calmly discuss the organization, but the guy practically pushed her out of the office. He said that it was very dangerous to walk so late. He asked her where she lived, and then he added that she should not be in that area at night in the future. The girl frowned and said, "Maria." Labrado didn't understand. She repeated that her name was Maria Avena. The guy couldn't remember for a long time where he had heard this last name. A little later, when he was drinking with a friend, he finally remembered. The friend asked him what he meant by that little one who had been running after him lately. The blonde confirmed, and then added that the Avenas were the family whose baron had suddenly gone bankrupt. So, in the past, this grumbler was an aristocrat. The brunette noticed that the well-bred girl most likely did not know, and then asked if his friend was thinking about marrying her. The guy answered a little sadly that no. Maria, But he didn't have time to finish because the girl herself looked out from around the corner shouting, "Labrado!" The boys were shocked. The blonde asked how she could find him so easily. Avena replied that she had a good nose and then asked if she wasn't a great spy. Today she came again with a request. Even though he would refuse her once again. The girl looked at him with her huge eyes and asked him to buy at least some rice, since they hadn't seen each other for so long. Labrado looked at her with sympathy. She understood, but she went to him anyway. On the day when she couldn't stand it anymore, not wanting to go anywhere else, she came to him. He invited her to come with him and asked what she wanted to eat. Maria replied that she didn't know. Maybe soup. The guy walking next to her said that he couldn't give her a job in the organization, no matter how hard she ran after him. However, he could always buy her food. She can come at any time. The girl first glanced at him distrustfully and then became happy. She decided to choose something more expensive. Librato remembered the boy Alfred, who always thanked him for the food he bought. The blonde laughed and said that he should thank him for the newspapers. The boy had not been seen lately. After that day, he had not seen Alfred delivering newspapers. The boy thought that if he found out where he was, they would definitely eat together at least once. Suddenly, someone covered his nose and mouth with a rag from behind. The bandit with a knife asked if he was a guild employee. He matched the description. Golden hair, dog-like face. The robber put a knife to his throat and asked Librato if he knew why he was doing this. Then he added that Alfred was dead. The boy said that he would pay off the debt he had been drawn into. He worked hard. And then at dawn he was hit and killed by a cart. The man called them a rude word. If only they hadn't indulged those swindlers. The man pressed the knife harder to his throat. Then he said that if he felt even a little sorry, then let him die quietly. Librato didn't have time to really think about anything, as a piercing scream was heard from behind. It was Maria screaming, attacking the bandit with a club. The blow of the bat stunned the robber. The blonde was surprised to see the girl. She immediately began asking if he was okay. The guy, having recovered from the initial shock, asked how she knew he was here. Avina came up to him and said she would explain later. She suggested hitting the bandit one more time before he came to. Librato sadly remembered his words about Alfred's death. He stood up and said that he was fine, and that the bandit should not be touched anymore. A couple of days later, the blonde met the girl in the office. Lowering his head, he asked about using tracking magic on him. She confirmed. Librato was angry. He knew she had no bad intentions, but he asked her not to risk herself anymore. If that man hadn't passed out, anything could have happened. And he repeated once again that even if she continued to run after him, she would still not become a member of the organization. Maria apologized. The guy lowered his head and said that in addition to dangerous missions, there are also people who dream of revenge, like that day. He looked up and invited her to join the organization that he would create himself. Avina looked at him in surprise and asked again. Librato smiled and replied that maybe it was a stupid idea, since the work was not clean, but at least it would not be connected with crime. And he won't let his employees suffer from threats and guilt. The guy wanted to create a guild like a family. He won't mindlessly send people away. He'll get level 4 health insurance. The girl's eyes widened even more at the phrase, like family. Librato continued to say that Maria had abilities, she was smart, and she had more than enough impudence. All that was needed was an organization where she could work safely. He extended his hand to her and said he would create one for her. She asked why he would go to such lengths for her. The guy replied that it was possible because he would regret it if someone else recruited her. Avina stood up and replied, "Okay." Then they joyfully held hands, and the girl called him the head of the organization. Remembering that moment, Maria realized that if it weren't for Librato, she didn't even know what path she would have taken. The happiest thing then was that his proposal sounded like, "Let's become a family." Avina was in the clouds as she examined the fabric of the dress. The Duke asked what his dear was thinking about. The girl answered absently that she had nothing to think about. She was just thinking about the dress. Winter, crossing his arms, said he would respect her choice if that was what she wanted, but he would refuse the paired design. Maria did not immediately understand what he meant. Until I focused my gaze on what I was trying to see. It was a loud red dress with lots of green flounces and ruffles, just like the name Burning Peacock. She immediately dropped the fabric and said the dress wasn't her taste. She just looked at it. It seemed like the designer was ahead of his time. Barry breathed a sigh of relief, or he'd almost called the doctors. Then he noticed that she was absent-minded in the carriage too, so he asked what was wrong. Avina replied that nothing. He retorted that she couldn't lie. Everything was fine here, but there was something wrong with her. The conversation was interrupted by the shop employees who brought dresses to the show. Maria replied that they would talk later, and now she would go to the fitting. The lady tried on several looks. The saleswomen praised her in every dress. Even Winter said she was perfect. But the girl did not share their delight. She was having a hard time breathing and was hot, and these spectators were sitting comfortably and indifferently assessing her. And so as not to suffer alone, Maria suggested that the Duke also try on several suits. After all, she wanted to see them so much. The man tried to avoid trying them on, but the saleswomen liked the idea. They noted that the newlyweds would be with each other at the wedding ceremony. That's why they should try them on together. Avina giggled and said that since the professionals said so, he should change his clothes faster. A smiling store employee noticed that they suited each other so well. The girl was walking around the store, waiting for the Duke to come in for a fitting. It turned out that even trying on a tuxedo takes a lot of time. One of the saleswomen approached her. She asked if Maria knew that she was very popular now. The lady was surprised. The worker replied that she had become Winter's bride in an instant. If it hadn't been for him, she would hardly have had the chance to choose their dresses. Then the saleswoman asked how she liked the dress. After all, she had to carefully select it, since the future bride has no taste at all. She then proceeded to explain that dresses differed depending on body type. Avina was shocked by such disrespect. She asked her name. Looking at her name tag, Maria said that she didn't realize that she had the Duke under her thumb. She then pointed to her upper body and said that her shoulder line was beautiful, so she needed a mermaid dress. Having broken the badge, the lady told her to bring her dresses of this cut with open shoulders. And only 3 pieces. The lady did not want to change anymore. She gives 5 minutes for everything. When the woman left, Avina thought sadly about how many strange people there were. Then the Duke had already returned. The girl was surprised by his quick return. The man said that he was in a hurry. Maria asked why. Barry replied that it was a high-class store, so the owner liked to separate people by status. He wanted to follow her, but she sent him to try on clothes. Avina grinned. She thought it was funny. Since she lived without money, she wouldn't be able to find clothes for herself. The girl said that she had lost her temper a little and showed her character. His Excellency replied that she had done the right thing. It turned out that she did not need his help. Avina sat down on the bench and said that it had not been difficult to use his name. Then she apologized and added that she would continue to borrow it often. Winter asked why she was apologizing. They were supposed to use each other. Maria was glad that he didn't mind. More dresses were brought in. The new outfit fit perfectly. The Duke said she had chosen a good dress and was surprised they had decided she had no taste. The workers had also prepared outfits for him. The man replied that it was not worth it. He wanted his darling to choose a tuxedo for him. Maria's eyes widened in surprise. She hissed at him questioningly. Why all of a sudden? His lordship quietly replied that they were pretending to be intimate. He had to play the role of a husband who was crazy about her. And he added that he thought she would make a better choice than these ladies. Avina glared at the groom, then yelled at the saleswomen for their worth. Since her princess had snow-white skin, only a frosty winter shade would suit him. If it was a warm tone, she would kill him. The spring one is also not allowed. Let them bring the light one, not the dark one. The Duke hissed at her to call him by his name, because immediately the saleswomen started whispering about the princess. After leaving the shop, the couple strolled along the streets of the city. His Excellency said that since they had picked out a dress and a tuxedo for him, her work was done. The rest was on him. The girl thanked him. Barry noticed that she seemed to feel better. Maria looked at him in surprise. The man replied that she had been walking around with a scary face since the morning. The girl asked if she wasn't always beautiful. Winter laughed, liking the way she was thinking. Avina said it was because of her friend. Touching the petals of the sunflowers on the counter, the lady thoughtfully explained that it seemed they had had a little row. He was upset that he couldn't accept her choice. She would really like him to believe in her as much as she believes in him. She thinks he thinks she's too frivolous, the Duke asked, so she could not trust him anymore. The lady answered, rather not. The man advised her to make the first move. After all, she was so worried about wanting to make peace. Maria sighed sadly. She agreed that it was probably worth it. Then she remembered and said that he should go first. Barry chuckled and said that they were like little children. They would probably make up quickly. As the Duke approached the carriage, he became wary. He noticed some guys hanging around it. Avina asked who these suspicious people were. The Duke replied that they were the Senate's puppets. He quickly grabbed the girl and hid around the corner. The man said that the Senate didn't like him being self-willed. If they caught them, they would give them hour-long lectures. The lady summed it up wittily. That's what married life means. Barry said she could use teleportation. Maria asked why she and not him. After all, she can't move 2 people at once. Winter began to grumble that he preferred not to use magic unless absolutely necessary. He glanced around the corner and said that they would soon surround them. Avina saw a partially destroyed fence nearby. She suggested escaping through this gap. The man stared at the fence wall in surprise. Someone else's property was there.